Well, everybody, thank you for coming back and joining us again today. I'm Robbie with Pursuit of Purpose, and with me I have
Chuck Olaf.
And my grandfather, Weldon Kaspar. Grandpa, if you wouldn't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself your own way and tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm Weldon Kaspar. I was born on a small farm in a home back in those days in 1926 in Milam County, Texas, near the city of, well, it was a little bitty town of Thorndale. We're on a small farm, and that's where I was raised, on a small farm until age 14. And after age 14, we moved to the big city of Beaumont.
The big city of Beaumont.
Yeah, it was big. Well, I don't know how far you want me to go with this before you ask me anything more, but that's basically my start. Well, at my first year in school, diphtheria was a dreaded disease that caught our family. So we were quarantined. And we were quarantined so much that, you know, our family had to stay at home. That I couldn't go to school enough to pass the grade, so I had to repeat the first grade. That's unusual, I think, for anybody.
I didn't know that.
Have to repeat the first grade because of the diphtheria that had us quarantined.
Sure.
And later, my sister actually died. My oldest sister, Pearlie, died from the diphtheria.
Really?
Yes, she did.
And I'd never heard that story before.
Yeah, well, that's true. She was 12 years old.
Wow.
She had it worse than any rest of them. Some of the other children had it too. They just shipped me off to my grandmother's because I was kind of a small, puny kid. And I was real small when I was born. And they didn't want me to catch it because they felt like I wouldn't survive it. So they sent me off to my grandmother's, and I stayed there till after Pearlie died, and then, you know, we got through the epidemic. Well, it wasn't called an epidemic, it was just...
like an outbreak, maybe?
Each family that had to be quarantined.
Okay. So, yes, go ahead.
So then we were going to school right across the pasture from home. Walking to school. We walked to school. I guess I've gone to school more ways than most people, but that was how it started, going to school walking. And it wasn't far. You could see the schoolhouse across the way. There was just a 2-room schoolhouse that went from the 1st to the 8th grade.
Oh, wow.
1st to the 4th, and then 4th to the 8th in the other classroom. So children were exposed to the lessons for older children, and that, I think that helped. You know, for the older classes.
So everybody got to hear everybody's lesson, no matter what age you were.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. But, you know, the teacher would concentrate on your grade level during a time when it was appropriate, and for the other grade levels at their time.
Okay.
But that's the way school was going at that time, at this little country school. Well, that school shut down, and then we started riding a bus to town, to Thorndale.
Okay.
And we started going to a parochial school. We went to the Lutheran school.
Oh.
Well, I went into the 2nd grade because I had already repeated the 1st, and there was a fellow there that said, "You don't belong in here. You're just the first time here. You're supposed to be in the 1st grade." Because that was my first time in that school.
Right.
Okay.
But I had an older uncle who was going to school, upper grade. He got him straightened up.
Ah. Okay. Thank God for family.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking out for you.
Yes.
Anyway, we rode bus to school for those years up until grade 7. Grade 7. Then after grade 7, I went to the public school. I went to the public school in Thorndale for about 6 weeks, and we moved, like I said, to the big city of Beaumont. And you know, because that little farm wasn't producing to to supply the needs of that big family.
Ah,
Because Mom and Dad had a total of 9 children. I fell right in the middle. I was number 5. And so there was 4 lower, 4 high, 4 greater, 4 smaller, and 4 bigger than I am.
Wow.
And right now there's only 3 of us left. 2 brothers. We would ride the bus to school, and because we were going to the parochial school at first, they would drop us off about 2 or 3 blocks from the school, and they went on to the high school. But that only lasted, like I said, for about 6 weeks, and we moved to Beaumont. Then I started going to South Park High
okay.
because I was a sophomore at that time.
Oh, okay.
I skipped the thing here. We went to China first. We went to we were out of China. I went to
China, Texas.
China, Texas for 1 year. For my freshman year, I went to China, and then the sophomore year went to Beaumont, to South Park.
Okay.
And they offered more things than they did at China, more opportunities, for studies. Anyway, we stayed in China. I mean, we lived out there near Fannette, out of Highway 124, and the way that school went was good. I wasn't able to participate in any activities, extracurricular activities, really,
Yes, sir.
because we were 7 miles out, and sometimes I'd ride a bicycle, and sometimes I'd ride the bus, and but I'll tell you, I skipped this also. Back in Thorndale, when we were going to that parochial school, part of the time we lived where there was no bus. So I rode there. As I said, I rode a donkey. Some of the time I rode a Shetland pony. I rode in a buggy. My grandmother had a buggy, and once in a while we'll ride that buggy.
Now, when you say buggy, you mean horse-drawn.
A horse-drawn buggy. One horse buggy. That's right. That's what I'm talking about.
That's a far cry from electric plug-in automobile.
There is a distance between that. Yes, there is. And I rode a bicycle, as I said, and walked some of the time. On a rare or very rare occasion, we could ride with my uncle in my uncle's car if the weather was real bad.
Okay.
If the weather was real bad, we could ride with him. He lived across over there, and we'd get a ride with him in those cases. And there were times too when the weather was too bad for us to walk home or come home, and we could stay at one of the aunts and uncles' houses who lived close by to the school. We had 2 uncles and aunts that lived nearby the school, and we would choose which one we're going to, and they were always they welcomed us anyway and kept us through the night, send us back to school the next morning.
You had very supportive extended family.
We did.
That's
we
good.
did, absolutely. But back in those days, it was more like that, of extended families supporting each other, I think, than it is today. I think something's been lost in that through prosperity. That's my take on it. Something's been lost in camaraderie and closeness with family and closeness with friends, I think, through that. But anyway,
It seemed like a time when people had to rely on each other more.
that's exactly right.
And to look out for each other, like you said, your family in town was there, and neighbors, your uncle across the street. Plus, just you mentioned having a small farm. I mean, y'all did a lot of work with each other,
Correct.
to support each other, and then it got as much of the other financial needs and things met from that too.
Yeah, you're jogging my memory of something I should have included.
Please.
So I'm going to back it up.
Yes, sir.
Back on that little farm, Daddy was snake bit by a diamondback rattlesnake.
Really?
Yeah, he was wearing tennis shoes. He was out there plowing. If you know what a turning plow is, you
Oh,
walk
yes.
behind it.
Yes.
And a rattlesnake bit him just above the big toe.
Oh, wow.
through that
Wow.
tennis shoe.
Yeah. Mm.
And he got terribly, terribly sick. You know, that was back, how do you get to a doctor?
Did he even receive treatment?
Yeah, the doctor came.
The doctor came
Finally
to the
got
farm.
The doctor to come, yeah.
Okay.
Finally, the doctor came there, and he put several suction cups on him to to suction the blood up his leg. I remember that just so vividly. That he put just to suction the hopefully the poisoned blood. They didn't have it down very well about how to treat for a rattlesnake bite. I can see that now.
Not like modern medicine.
Near like modern. Anyway, Daddy was very, very sick, and during that time, you mentioned about helping each other. Relatives and friends would come and help with the farm stuff.
Wow.
That needed to be done.
Right.
Well, some of us kids who were old enough to do something, we would take care of feeding the stock.
Right.
We had cows and horses and pigs and chickens. We'd take care of.
Yeah, chores.
Yeah, we had chores we had to take care of, and we'd feed them and gather the eggs and milk the cows, and we had to do that at a very young age.
Right.
And I know that sometimes I went to school smelling like a barnyard.
But I'll bet you weren't the only one at school that smelled like a barnyard either.
I was not. That's right. There were others there too.
That had been through the similar experiences.
Similar thing. Yeah. Well, as we go along, I may have to back up to some other things too.
That's perfect. No, that's totally
I
fine.
had skipped over that.
That's okay.
But that was a very important part of my life.
Absolutely.
When Daddy thought he was going to die one night, and he told us,
Yes.
"You kids mind Mama, because I may not be here tomorrow."
Wow.
Ooh, that was something to take.
Do you remember what age you were when that happened? Approximately.
I think I was about 10 years old, something like that. I don't remember the exact year.
Definitely old enough that it stuck with you.
Yeah.
So
But
y'all,
you see-
y'all had already lost Pearlie at this time.
Yes.
And then now we're looking at maybe losing
Daddy.
your daddy.
Yeah,
And all of y'all are still school age children and below.
that's right.
And how vulnerable was that time?
And below, and as a matter of fact, I think 2 of the children hadn't even been born yet.
Oh, wow.
But anyhow, that the Lord took us through that.
Yes.
That's all I can say about that, because it was a struggle,
Absolutely.
especially for Mama,
Yeah.
and of course of us kids too. But we didn't shoulder the load like Mama did. Anyway, we got through that all right, and appreciated the fact that so many came and helped with the things in the farm. You see, as it is, I was born in 1926. That's before the Big Depression. The 26 years of the 26th of the 20th, I'm sorry, were considered the Roaring Twenties.
Right.
You remember that phrase? The
I have
Roaring
heard that
20s?
phrase. Yes,
Yes.
sir.
And sometimes I think we're living through roaring periods too.
Well, I have no disagreement with that.
Right.
And it kind of led to the Depression, I think.
Hmm.
We felt it firsthand.
Absolutely.
So I was growing up there from 6 years on, 6 years of age up to through the end of 30s, which is 14, through the Depression. And things were difficult. I mean, things were rationed. You couldn't just go up there and buy new tires. And yours had to be plumb slick in order to qualify.
It's a fascinating concept for people these days, though.
Right.
In
Yeah.
such an age of abundance,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
that's
hard
right.
to imagine that sort of.
I'm sorry. And actually, you know, gum was wrapped in little aluminum like wrappers,
Yes.
and we were asked to save those,
To recycle the
to
aluminum.
recycle them. And even toothpaste, it came in metal tubes. We were asked to save those to recycle them. And the products were mainly going to the military stuff.
Right.
You know, what was being produced in the way of machinery and automobiles and things, it was all headed for the military. We didn't have Didn't have commercial automobiles for a couple of years there during the war. Of course, now this is after the Depression, and that's, well, kind of started my adult time.
Right.
When I got through with high school in 1944.
So you finished high school in 44.
Right,
that's your class ring?
that's my class ring.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing. Well, before you go on to your next chapter of this story, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask a question that may be somewhat illustrative to our audience.
Okay.
So you were, as you say, a middle child in your household. And do you know under what conditions you were actually born? Like when your mother gave birth to you, where were you born?
I was born in the home, and I don't know whether she had a midwife there or a doctor came.
Okay.
I do know that some of the later children who were born, I was old enough to know that they had a doctor come when it was time for the birth.
Quite a bit difference now.
I don't remember my birth.
Well, no, I didn't think you would. But I just meant under the conditions you were born, you would have been told, and you would have seen your younger siblings what conditions they were born in.
Right.
So
in the home. Every one of us was born in the home.
Very good. That's what I was getting at, was that the births were typically in the home.
That's right.
Back then, and
yes, they were, because transportation was horse and buggy or a saddle horse or wagon, And this reminds me of a thing that was really early in my life as a child, or I guess what you'd call today a teenager.
An adolescent.
Yeah. I was permitted to go with Daddy on a bale of cotton to town to have it ginned. And I was able to bring my friend along, Willard Berry.
Okay.
He and I rode the top of that bale of cotton on the wagon, horse-drawn, to the gin, waiting there in line to have it ginned. And after that was all done, and Daddy collected his pay for the cotton, he went and paid off a grocery bill, that he'd bought on credit. It was
y'all had a grocery tab.
Yeah, it was pretty common to have a grocery tab.
Okay.
So he went and paid that off, and then he gave Willard and me each a treat with a chocolate candy on a stick.
Ah.
Yeah, that was my first. What was it called? What's called Eskimo pie or something?
Oh my! So you had an ice cream, like a chocolate-covered ice cream on a stick.
Chocolate-covered ice cream on a stick.
Wow.
That was my first one of those.
How about that?
That was a treat.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, anyway.
That was good payment for two young men.
It was.
Yeah.
Well, we helped with the picking cotton too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, back then, I don't think there was any law or any follow-up of whose kids are working or whose kids are not.
Yes, everybody worked.
Everybody worked to pull things together to get food on the table.
Right.
And shirt on your back.
Right.
So.
So when it comes to things, you kind of mentioned medical care a little bit with your dad's snake bite.
Yeah.
Did you find that, looking back, there were more, I guess what would be a common phrase, more home remedies, more things we did, and of course you ate right out of your own ground mostly, to kind of maintain a level of health, because there wasn't really a big medical thing. Nowadays we have people prescribing things for everything.
Right.
But it seems as though in that time there was really more things we did in the home.
You're right. There was home remedies. As a matter of fact, periodically a Watkins peddler would come around. Watkins products.
Okay.
With liniment.
Yeah.
My grandmother's, she and the liniment was partners. I mean, you get a scratch, put a liniment on it.
Okay. That'll cure anything.
Yeah. It's kind of like Frank's Red Hot sauce today. You put that stuff on everything.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know what all she used that liniment for, but that was one of the things she had all the time. And
it was the cure-all, fix-it.
It was. And yes, there were things that were used, to keep you going. where we didn't go to the doctor much.
Correct.
Hardly ever.
Yes.
My first time to the doctor was a dentist.
Mm-hmm.
I had a bad tooth. I had to go to the dentist, but we didn't go to the doctor very much. Very seldom. I was a very timid person, especially as far as when it came to girls.
Well,
I had
let's
the
say
hardest
that.
time socializing with the girls.
Okay. Apparently, at some point, that got taken care of.
Well, it did in a big way. Okay, about that time I was in high school, attending South Park High. The Greenies, the good old Greenies.
Yes.
And graduated in 1944. Well, during my last year of school, we were at war with Germany and Japan. Following that event at Pearl Harbor.
That's World War II,
I
right?
didn't mention that about World War II, about Pearl Harbor being bombed by Japanese, and
Yes, sir.
this launched us into the Second World War.
Right.
Well, recruiters came around to school to see if any of the young fellows wanted to join ahead of time, enlist.
Right.
So I did. I enlisted in the Air Corps. It was called the Air Corps back then.
Okay.
It was Army Air Corps. It's been changed since, but I enlisted in the Army Air Corps, and then I graduated that year in ¡44, and they called me in August of '44. And I had to leave on my sister's birthday, on Lillian's birthday, to go to San Antonio to be inducted into the Army.
Okay.
Well, from there they sent me to Amarillo for basic training. This was a hot time, August, September, October, up in Amarillo, and 6 weeks of basic training. It was not as grueling as the Marines or the regular Army, and I was thankful for that. But it was basic training to put you in physical condition and mental condition to face what's coming up.
Right.
So from there, they shipped me to Madison, Wisconsin, and started me in a training. Well, I had one of my greatest disappointments there. They did the physical, and I passed everything about the physical except depth perception with my eyes.
Okay.
My heart was so set on becoming a pilot.
Okay.
I wanted to drive one of these P-51s so bad.
Yes.
I did want to fly, but anyhow, that was the only thing that I failed in that test, and he was kind enough, the test operator was kind enough to say, let's set you up an appointment and you come back a certain day, and if you pass 2 out of 3 tries, you'll be all right. I came back and I passed 1 out of 3 tries. So I had to choose then between being a radio mechanic or being a radio operator. Well, I thought radio mechanics would be better. So they sent me to Madison, Wisconsin for radio school. After graduating from that, I went to Chanute Field, Illinois for electronic mechanics training.
Okay.
When that finished, we graduated from that. We sent us down to Boca Raton Field, Florida for radar mechanic training. Radar was in its early days at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the type of equipment that would allow high altitude bombing by seeing the screen, seeing what you have down below, and seeing when to release bombs and that sort of thing.
Right.
They could even, bombing through overcast even, it was called. BTO, bombing through overcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, in a sense, my disappointment led to a better thing, because the young men who did qualify for the pilot training, they didn't get to finish it all.
Oh.
And I didn't get to finish the mechanic training for radar either, because the war ended. And war ended, they stopped all that.
Right.
So I had a very good friend there in Boca Raton. We did a foolish thing, if you want to hear about it.
Sure.
We rented a bateau boat, kind of a seagoing seagoing rowboat.
Okay.
And we rode the tide out of that waterway into the Atlantic.
Oh my.
Thinking, well, we'll ride that out there and we'll have a fun time in the sun.
And it's just the two of you?
All day, just the two of us.
Okay.
Well, in our lack of knowledge, I'll say, and maybe it's ignorance, it carried us farther out there than we thought it would. We had to work to get back to shore.
I'll bet.
Oh my.
We had to work to get back to shore, and then we had to wait till the tide went back out. I mean, came back in.
To help you
So
in.
it could help us ride, because you couldn't row against that tide.
Right.
You could not row against that tide.
That's quite a big pond to paddle yourself around in.
Well, it is.
Wow.
It is. But anyhow, that was an experience he and I enjoyed
Absolutely.
after the fact.
Yes.
We enjoyed it all, but it was a time off from other duties and
An adventure.
it was an adventure.
So I have this image of these two young men growing up pretty much nowhere near that kind of water,
Yeah.
but with nothing but just confidence and being pretty fit and saying, let's just do it. And then we end up in a situation, but it worked out. Thank goodness. But that had to have its little fearful moment there for a bit.
It did, till we finally worked our way back. We had to go around, where the tide was rolling out so much from that waterway,
Yeah.
that channel.
Jetties.
Yeah, and we got back to we were ready to rest on that shore.
I'm sure you
They
were.
were worn out.
Rowing for your lives.
Rowing,
Yeah.
yes, rowing
That's
for your
right.
lives.
Anyway, that was a good friend from New Mexico, Fred Beard. He and I, we were lifetime buddies after that.
Very good.
I visited with him a number of times after we got out of the military. But anyway, all of that training actually led me to the vocation that I followed then as an electrician.
Oh.
And besides that, after I got out of the Army, I was messing around at home, wondering what I'm going to do now. And I got into a drawer where I had kept some of my clothing before,
Yes, sir.
and there was a card in there. Back in those days, some of these schools would send cards to graduates,
Oh.
encouraging them to come.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this card was in there, advertising the Cohen Electrical School in Chicago,
A vocational school.
vocational school.
Yes.
So I said, well, maybe this is what I need to do. So I called, or I didn't call them. Maybe I did. I don't know how I
You
could
reached
make
out
that.
to 'em one way or another.
Probably wrote a note or something. Anyway, they accepted me under the GI Bill. You know what the GI Bill is?
Yes, sir.
How that worked.
Yes, sir.
They accepted me under the GI Bill, so I went up there and took that electrical school course, and that helped me some more in the direction of what my life was supposed to go to, how it was supposed to go.
So isn't it fascinating how what you thought at the time was a big disappointment, a problem, that you wanted to become a pilot,
Yeah.
but instead, through what you thought was failure and disappointment, you developed this new direction, and it became an opportunity for you to pursue a purpose.
I have to say that's divine guidance.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't know how else to put it, but
I don't
that's
disagree a
divine
bit.
guidance. So
I
some
think there's a
people
more
like that.
perfect way. That's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. And
Well-
yes, we do believe in that. We tend to encourage a lot of our students and clients to say, what may seem like a no is really becoming a yes. And
Yes.
you more or less said that a door closed, not knowing this greater door was going to open, and then next thing you know, you're off into a career. So
That's
tell
right.
us where that career took you. Where after your school training and you cashed in that GI Bill and came out with some of those credentials and some of those skills, and where did it go from there?
Well, it started off with a little radio shop, a little radio repair shop, but in Buna.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my family was living up there
Okay.
in that area at that time. So that's another kind of an interesting story. I came home from that school and the family had moved. And I had not been informed as to where they
Unbeknownst to
went,
you.
Oh my!
So I visited with my sister who was living in an apartment in Beaumont, she and Uncle Johnny. And she told me exactly how to get there. So I rode a bus out there, got off at the spot she described, and walked back up in there, and there they were. There was the house.
All right.
So I found them in spite of them going off and leaving me without an address. I mean, it just happened that way.
Sure.
You know, that's all.
Sure.
So anyway, while they were living up there, I thought, well, maybe this is a good place to start a radio business, radio repair shop, because there was not one in Buna. So I got to talking to a merchant there who had a little extra space, little extra room there. No, he let me use that to start a radio shop. So I worked with that a little while, and here come a man in with a radio, and we got to talking. He was from DuPont in Orange. I mean, he worked in DuPont in Orange, and he described to me how good that was working for them. And I thought, well, that's a steady income. If I can get on there, I don't have to worry about, is somebody going to bring something in for me to repair it, get some money, or
Right.
get some pay. So I went and applied there, and I got on. So the man who I was renting from in Buna, he kept taking radios in as they would bring them for me during my spare time to work on them.
Ah.
And that was a good arrangement there for a while. But that kind of went dry too, you know, like we have droughts every now and then.
Sure. Sure.
And
In our world, we call that a side hustle.
okay.
So you had a steady job and you had your side hustle going.
That was right.
I like to tell folks that keeps a little cash flow in my pocket. Then I pay my bills with my day job.
Yeah.
But DuPont, what a good acquisition in your life.
Another reinvention.
Yes.
It was good. It was very good to be able to go to work there. And I had worked there about six months as an operator helper. And an opportunity come up to bid on electrical, to get in the electrical department.
Right.
So I bid on it, and I got it. And so that's where my income came to supply my family.
So all that build-up through the military and all the things that you had done finally brought you to this point
Yeah,
where you were able to find a place, settle in, and create a career.
right.
Would you agree with that?
I agree with that.
That's pretty fascinating.
And it worked out well. That again, I say, is the Lord's guidance.
So about how old were you at this time when you got on at DuPont and made your
I was
start
22.
there? 22 years
Because it was
old.
1948, and I was born in 26, so I'd be 22.
Very good.
I was 22. I'd had 27 months in the military, and I skipped one period that was really enjoyable. And when the war ended, I had re-enlisted for 1 year, so
Okay.
I know when I'm going to get out.
Okay.
And they sent me to Puerto Rico to
Oh.
spend 8 months of that year down there in a replacement depot related to electronic equipment. You know,
Okay.
where I was able to do a little something beneficial to the Army,
Yeah,
the Air
absolutely.
Corps, plus myself.
Okay.
Anyway, that was my final assignment in the military. But yes, you're right. All of that directed me to a point where I could make a living, support a family. And speaking of family, I guess it must have been in '49, I was boarding in Orange because my family was living elsewhere.
Is that because that's where DuPont was located?
DuPont, yeah, the
Yes.
DuPont in
Okay.
Orange. I was boarding in a boarding house there with a fellow. He was alongside, same thing, same similar situation where I was. Only he was working in a dry goods store.
Okay.
He was a shoe salesman in a dry goods store, and he knew this young woman in ladies garments, And he thought we ought to meet, so he introduced us.
Ah, yes.
That was Aveline.
Okay.
That was Aveline. That was my wife. We did hit it off good together, and a couple of years we married. We married in 1950, and started a family right away. And in 8 years, we had 4 children, 3 girls and a boy. And she had leukemia. Abilene had leukemia during the time she was carrying Marlene. And there was some real concern on my part and others too, whether this is going to affect that child, you know, with this blood disease, you know. And leukemia was a blood disease that they really hadn't had a handle on yet at that time, in the 50s. So that was a concern, and then in 1958, well, her last goal was to see her baby reach 1 year of age. She met that goal. She saw the baby reach 1 year of age, and then after that she passed in 1958. And then this was a little bit of a lot of a struggle.
Absolutely.
4 children, the youngest one 1 year old.
Right.
And of course I had family support too. I mean,
absolutely.
I had family support there, and also I was able to get some who were not family to hire on and help with family, help me. And then finally, you may have heard of talking about Aunt Lucy. Aunt Lucy was actually Barbara, my sister-in-law's aunt.
Okay.
And so they connected us, and she came. She was an older lady, in her 60s, I think, at that time, and she just stayed there and took care of the kids.
To help you out.
Yeah, so I could work. And well, I paid her a little. And I think back on that often. I don't think I could have possibly have paid her enough for what she did. But anyway, that went on then for 4 years. Well, she wasn't there the full 4 years, but there was family and other help there. And then she stayed the latter part of the time until kind of an interesting way that I was connected to Eula. I may be getting boring and telling something.
No, you're not getting boring, Grandpa. But you mentioned Eula. Now I know who that is.
Yeah.
But introduce who that is in the story.
Eula was my second wife.
Okay.
And the way I got to know her, my younger brother was in the seminary at St. Louis, at Springfield, Illinois.
Okay.
He wrote to me. Well, the whole family was concerned. What's Weldon going to do with those kids now, you know?
Right.
And he wrote to me and said he knew of this lady who has 4 children and is always in church regularly at St. John Beaumont. He said it might be a good idea if I could get in touch with her. Well, I put that in the back file for quite a while, because I was still a little hesitant, you know, to approach a woman, a girl. And finally, I got up the nerve and I called and asked if it'd be all right if I bring my kids out there and we meet. Well, for what? What purpose? Well, just to get to know each other. You know?
And that was the question that you were asked by her.
Right.
Was for what purpose?
Yeah.
What are you coming out here for? And you're bringing a bunch of kids?
Yeah. Well, it's just to get acquainted.
Yeah.
I told her about my brother, telling him, you know.
Okay.
And I'd like just like to get acquainted. So she agreed to that, and so we went out there and got acquainted. A number of times we visited a whole bunch of us together, you know, all 8 kids, hers 4 and my 4. And I learned that she had been abandoned.
Oh.
Yeah. She was abandoned while she was pregnant with the smallest. So after counseling with my pastor, he agreed we could go ahead and get married.
So like couples counseling or premarital counseling? That
Premarital
kind of
counseling.
Very good.
That's right.
Very good.
Premarital counseling. And so we got married, And the kids all seemed to be elated over the whole thing, you know. And that's
fascinating. Yeah.
Well, before we married, we were sitting around the breakfast table once, me and my 4 children, and Marlene said, "Daddy, why don't you and Miss Iten Miller get married?" That was her married name, you know, her widow's name. Well, I'd been thinking about it, but I didn't realize the kids were thinking about it.
Yes.
But they were all happy about
They
it.
sure liked the idea of it.
They all did. Her kids did too. They enjoyed it. Well, anyhow, we married, and that was my longest married life together, you know. We raised those 8 kids, and she was a nurse. She was working for a doctor here in Beaumont, and then she went to work for Texaco as a plant nurse in Texaco for a while. I didn't like her going over that bridge, especially in the winter time.
Yeah.
You know, from Orange, we were living in Orange by then,
Okay.
and I didn't like her going over that bridge, and I finally persuaded her to let that go. We'd have to cut back a little bit and tighten our belt a little bit and live on my income, but we can do it. So we did. And she lived till the year 2000. Both of us wondered, are we going to see the turn of the century? Are we going to see the new millennium? Well, we did, together, but in December of that year of 2000. Her heart valve, they called it aorta stenosis, aorta shrinking, and they said it's going to have to be replaced. You can't live with it very much longer if you don't have it replaced. It's going to take you. So we concluded the surgery is in place, and she didn't make it off the operating table. She bled that too much. So that terminated that marriage. Someone was saying recently that 40% of the marriages in this time are ending in divorce. Well, the rest end in death. In the meantime, my oldest brother had passed away. Irvin had died. And a couple of years after Eula's death, Lois and I, that was Irvin's widow, my brother's widow, got to seeing each other, and that worked out to be a I don't know how to put it, an old person marriage.
Y'all were a beautiful couple.
Yes.
We were.
Yeah.
I was 76 and she was 74.
Okay.
And we really loved each other deeply and enjoyed that time together. It was, I wrote a number of poems related to that, which I'm kind of proud of.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I've got one posted on the wall, and now I got one in. The last one was based on a trip we made up to the Big Thicket Trail.
Okay.
We walked the Big Thicket Trail. They call it the what's that? Pitcher Plant Trail.
Oh, okay. Yes.
And they had a nice walkway there, and then a place where you can stop and rest. I took a picture, and then I was inspired to write a little poem about that, about our journey. And I'm real proud of that, but it's in a little album now at home. But anyway, that was a blessed marriage too. It's odd in a way to me how the Lord guided me through life and experience some things that not many people experience. I mean, like I said, in the meantime, my brother had died, and now, before Lois died. Hank, my son, had cancer, and it took him. Of course, there were others too, my sisters. And yes, it's just, I look back at those things, and I see it just seems impossible to have been maneuvered through all that. I'm going to say I've been maneuvered because I just was going where the Lord was leading. That's what I see.
Mm-hmm.
You stayed faithful and hopeful.
Yes, I did.
And devoted.
I did, And we were blessed to be able to bring those children up, and for the most part, they're doing well. When you got a family that size, there's going to be some difficulties.
Yes.
I think it's inevitable. There's going to be some difficulties.
Absolutely.
There are some difficulties, and I'm always happy when I see reconciliation and togetherness and love and people coming together.
Absolutely.
Were there any additional children besides the 2 groups of 4, or did y'all have any children amongst, or you just raised the 8 that you had?
We just raised the 8 we had. That was plenty.
No, absolutely, that was plenty.
We raised that 8.
Yeah.
Did your home remind you of your childhood home with all those kids and all that?
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
The siblings did similar heckling and
Absolutely, that's
fun
beautiful.
things as we did when we were kids. I didn't cover any of that back when I was a childhood, in our talk.
Okay.
But yeah, we were typical. I guess you'd say typical siblings.
Oh yeah.
Sure.
And our children were typical siblings too, in a way. I mean, from different directions, but not being blood kin, they still meshed together very well, and still do.
Yes.
And I'm thankful for that.
That's beautiful.
Very thankful for that.
I like the fact that both sets needed the other parent. They needed a good dad as well as yours needed a good mom, and as much as that gives kids a lot of stability and a lot of confidence, it also frees them up to really become themselves. And sometimes some of that can be the stinker side of them and the more difficult side. But there's a freedom to that because they know there's a dad around to kind of tighten the reins, or a mama to give a few more hugs, or maybe the other way around sometimes.
Yeah.
And so even though it made it seem like they were fussing and competing amongst them, that's actually not a bad thing. That means we actually have a healthy home. Kids are actually interacting and learning how to work the world. And it seems like y'all gave them that.
One of the things that my children even review to me once in a while, and Gail did not long ago, your mom, she said, when we see somebody misbehaving, some children misbehaving, when my kids would get something that I knew they needed to correct, we would tell them to hold hands and walk around the house so many times. She said they would do that, and they'd walk around just laughing and enjoying it until they got close to where we were, and then they'd act like they're all messed. Like they're all messed.
Pretending to be upset.
Pretending to be upset about having to do that. And I think sometimes they did things just to get to do it.
It's probably true.
That is great. That's a good childhood memory right there.
It really is.
Well, it evidently is, because they review it to me every now and then.
Sure.
Well, I'd like to make an observation with you, if I could, and then I'd like to pose a question to you, okay? The observation is, and you have this unusual life experience with this aspect in mind. This is a very heavy thing, what I'm about to state, but you have been married 3 times and never been divorced.
Right.
I would wager that you are a member of a much smaller than 1% of our population. The typical, there's much more common to be married 3 times, but also divorced.
Right.
Equal number. Okay? Yeah. So you had successful relationships and marriages. Okay? And you have experienced in your life every form of grief imaginable. You have lost people of every type that a person can lose. Siblings, parents, brothers, children. You've lost it all. And you still are positive, forward thinking. You still keep going. If you had to give a piece of advice, here's the question. What would it be for someone who is, let's say, at the beginning of their journey? So the advice would be, in relation to grief, how do you deal with that? And relationships, those two things.
Well, in all circumstance, have an attitude of gratitude, because there is good in just about everything, and we don't always see it, but it's there. Have an attitude of gratitude, and keep a song in your heart. Music is a common language, but it also is a comforting language.
Yes.
It's a comforting language.
Yes.
So those two things, I'd say, keep an attitude of gratitude and keep a song in your heart just as a starter. But trust in the Lord is the main thing. Trust in the Lord for each day and be thankful to Him for everything. That's the attitude, the gratitude thing. But
so what it sounds like to me is you have danced your way through your life.
Oh, when you mentioned about the marriages,
yes,
there no divorce, of course, but there have been difficulties.
Absolutely.
And there have been difficult times to work through.
Yes.
But by the grace of God, we were able to have an understanding and come through them all right, and still have love there.
Yes.
So the amazing thing about what I meant when I said you danced your way through life, when we learn to dance, what happens? We step on each other's feet, right? It doesn't feel too good.
No.
And it also feels uncomfortable, awkward to start out, right?
Yeah.
Anytime you learn a new dance.
Right.
But you still danced your way through life.
Okay.
I
hadn't thought of it being that way, but
you had a song to dance to. You had gratitude in your heart.
Yeah.
And you followed the lead of the Lord. You danced your way through your life.
Okay.
And that's beautiful to me. It's poetic.
That is beautiful thought.
It seems as though it takes a lot of courage, not just to do some of the things that you were for sure called to do, to leave the comfort of home, to go off to your trainings, to go to the jobs, to leave Texas, go to Chicago, bring those skills back. You got a lot of courageous moments, but what you and Robbie were just talking about, the most identified courage I've seen is to listen to the song and respond to the song. And especially when it was put to the test, because with the losses that Rob mentioned, as well as just those daily difficulties that probably you and all three of your beautiful brides had to go through, just with littles and kids and then their kids and other circumstances going on. I just congratulate you for developing that early on and mastering that as a child of God, and then someone ready to share that message with the world. That to me is something I will definitely take from today. Thank you for that.
Well, I'm very thankful for godly parents who directed me in a lot of that originally,
Right.
and not only godly parents but good teachers and pastor.
Yes.
Which I could look back and see where, that all had an influence, which was good.
Well, I want you to know I'm grateful for you and your influence in my life.
Well, thank
Been
you.
very impactful.
Well, thank you.
You've been one of my greatest mentors.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. No, thank you.
Well, all
And
right.
is there anything that you'd like to add or tell our audience? I got one more question for you that I didn't get to ask. Okay, this is another kind of a broad question. You have been on this earth now for much better than the part of a century. You're getting real close to that triple-digit mark.
Yeah.
Right? So, what do you think about the word progress? Just in general, the word progress. You have seen the biggest changes in mankind since the wheel and fire, right? You have borne witness to the invention and proliferation of the internet, but before that, television. Before that, you were working on radios. Well, what was coming after radios?
Television.
Telephone.
Telephone.
The big use of telephone, the widespread telephone.
Yeah.
So you've seen so much progress in our world. Automobiles weren't even as widespread, even close back. You rode a donkey to school.
Yeah.
So what do you think about the word progress, and what does it mean to you, and how does it influence you, and then how do you see it influencing our world?
To me, progress is truly progress when there's something that benefits humankind or maybe even animals. You know, progress, you make progress towards caring for animals as well as you make progress towards caring for people.
Right.
If it's an effort and a result that brings a good thing to people,
right,
or a good thing to the world, that's progress. But if it's called progress when it's really leading in the wrong direction,
right,
that is not progress. We're using the word progress in this country, in my opinion, in a way that it's not progress.
Some people do.
It's degress.
Yeah, they use it in a they like to politicize the word progress, but I'm actually talking about the true functional word of where we've been to where we are now. That's progress. Like the invention of electricity and the widespread use was just before your time, but moving towards from where you began to where we are now. You have seen so much actual progress.
Absolutely.
The invention and provision of goods and services that have been almost otherworldly. And I just wanted you to see, I wanted, kind of you to speak to that a little bit, because you can talk about the experiences of progress like no one else that I know, because you've lived it. Like thinking about, there were dairies everywhere when you were a kid.
Right.
And there are almost none left.
No family dairies.
No, that's exactly right.
No
The dairies are very few in the country, and they truck the milk everywhere it needs to go.
Yeah.
So that's just one example.
Yeah.
But the how has progress affected humankind in your view, in your life?
It has benefited it a lot. I mean, health-wise, for example, all the development of medicines that has helped us keep healthy, and the ways of having to work where you're not out there struggling in the hot sun all time every day, where that tears your body down. But there's been progress to facilitate having decent working conditions. That's good progress, I think.
Absolutely.
And this right here, I mean, we didn't have any Kleenex when I was going.
Absolutely, yeah.
We had kerchiefs.
Didn't have very many handkerchiefs either.
Didn't have many of those.
Think about how fast Dad would have recovered from that snake bite these days.
Yes.
Right, that's right.
They got anti-venom everywhere you go.
Yes.
That's right, and it's accessible.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's right. That's a drastic difference. And there are for example, polio. You wouldn't remember anything about polio.
Or diphtheria.
Diphtheria, yes. These diseases that were dreaded because they took people's lives.
Correct.
There's been progress made in that direction to help people stay healthier, and to make life easier. I can remember my mama washing clothes in the old wash tub, and when I got big enough, I had to keep the fire going under that big kettle to keep her some hot water to wash her clothes in.
Right.
And then she'd put them in that And when they were especially dirty, she'd scrub them on that scrub board.
Yes.
Y'all may not.
Oh, I know what it is.
Yeah.
I've never seen one in person work like that, but I know what it is.
Yeah, I've seen her do that, and I felt, goodness, but somebody saw that need too, and that's progress to have all the machinery we have now. It makes it so much easier. Just throw it in there and turn it on.
There you go.
So overall, in the human experience, would you say that our lives and livelihood has vastly improved throughout the last century?
I would say yes.
And I would agree with you.
I would say yes.
I think that we have some mental perversions that our society has developed over time.
Yeah.
But overall, in our human experience and our abilities and conveniences and advantages that we have, people reference the good old days, right?
Yeah.
They talk about the good old days.
Yeah.
And when you think of that phrase, the good old days, you relish a time where thoughts were more pure. That's what you think, right? But when you look back at the technology of the good old days, was it really better?
In some regards, I guess it was better. In some regards, it was not as good. When you said, think back on the good old days, my first thought went back to childhood, I guess.
Okay.
Because we had freedom to roam. You didn't have near as many fences to have to stay behind and that sort of
fears.
thing. Or what?
Or fears.
Or fears, that's right. You could let your kid go. I did a lot of hitchhiking, or some. When I went to Chicago, I started off hitchhiking to Chicago. Daddy took me out there to 11th Street Extension. That was the highway out of Beaumont. And I started riding my thumb to Chicago.
And it was just an acceptable form of travel back
At
then.
a certain point, I hailed a bus and stopped and got on the bus, and I went to sleep. And I heard, what woke me up is heard people talking about that terrible explosion down in Texas City. You heard about that explosion in Texas City.
Yes.
They were talking about that. And I knew nothing about it. And here I was coming from Texas, and I was up there in Illinois.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
going to Chicago. And they were talking about that. So that's how I learned about the Texas City explosion.
On a bus.
On a
going to
bus.
school.
On a bus going to
Chicago.
Going to that
And woke
Cohen
up
Electrical School in Chicago.
and woke up to that report, that story.
Yeah.
My.
Finding out about home while you're in Chicago.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, and I'm going to do a little compare and contrast here. So as we're discussing this, the pleasures of progress and the vulnerabilities of progress, maybe you can speak to our friends to say, despite all of those pleasures and vulnerabilities, if they could keep just a handful of things at their core, and you've mentioned them in and out of our interviews, but if they could stay close to the core, maybe there won't be as many of the vulnerabilities of progress. What are some of those core things that you latched on early and kept and tried your best to instill in your friends and family?
Your values.
Your values.
Well, genuine concern for your neighbor is one of the important things.
Yes.
And I see, I think that's very important
Oh, yeah.
to the well-being of a country, to the well-being of a community, to the well-being of a home, a family, is a genuine concern and caring, compassion for your fellow human being.
Yeah.
My thoughts are back to Christianity, back to Christ. That's, to me, that is where the harmony is, if we will embrace it. That's where the basic life is, if we will embrace it, and in Christ,
Yes, sir.
and trusting the Lord.
Faith.
Thank you.
Faith,
That's
trusting the Lord.
Thank you.
That's without that, we have what we see: chaos.
So it is the order
Uh-huh.
to our chaos.
Yeah. The disorder, in a sense,
Yes.
of the chaos that develops if you put God out of the picture.
Yes.
If you ignore Him, reject Him in a sense, that's what you're doing. It leads you to all kinds of some kind of
Degradation. So
disharmony.
Yes.
Disharmony.
So what do you think about this? While you were talking, it inspired me with a thought. So what if in all of this technology and progress that we've made in our conveniences, in our ability to maintain and prolong life with our health, in all of our advantages that we've created in our physical world, we've created a scenario where we've become lazy in mind and spirit. So we've gotten a lot better at manipulating our physical realm. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do.
We've learned how to extend our life far more than what we did 100 years ago. Mm-hmm. We've learned how to work smarter. Mm-hmm. We've learned how to create more. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But we've learned also patterns of thinking less, patterns of believing less.
Right, yeah.
And creating voids in our faith. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that. Yeah, I think that's right on.
It just sounded like what you were saying, like if I could summarize it that way, if you'd agree with it.
I agree with that, yeah.
One of the things we often teach is there has to be a respect of failure. So if my belief system is inhibiting me from growing, if I have a failure in the hands of the right person, and you're a lifetime example of setback, keep moving forward, setback, keep moving forward. We're a move through type of organization, and you said it before we could say it, which was perfect. Now I know where Rob gets it, which is beautiful. But moving through these difficulties to these better and better things, and knowing they're going to be there, believing they're going to be there. That's faith, and that's perfect.
Faith.
Thank you.
Well, Grandpa, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm disagreeing. That is faith. The Bible describes what faith is, and it is what it is.
Yes, sir. Well, as we wrap up, I ask a question of every guest that we have. This is one of our traditions on the show. So here's the question for you. If you could go back in time, back to when you were just entering into manhood, and you could give yourself a message all those years ago, probably seems just like yesterday in your mind, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. So if you could go back in time and give yourself a message, whisper in your own ear, but that's all you can do. You can't change anything. You just give yourself the message. What would you say? What would be the message?
Avoid some of those foolish, stupid, silly things that you did. And you look and not dwell on what went wrong, because things can go wrong all the time, but not dwell on that, but look forward to things being better, and work towards that end.
That's perfect. That you couldn't have. You just illustrated the grand theme of your entire life in that one sentence. Constantly look for the opportunity to reinvent yourself through your struggles.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing what you just said.
Okay.
But that's what you said. Don't dwell on the problem that you've more or less created or that may have happened in front of you.
Yeah.
Look through it and keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's beautiful, Grandpa, and thank you for that. And I appreciate you being our guest.
Well, thank you.
Did you want to say something?
Well, regrets only set you backwards.
Yeah.
And I know we all have some things we could regret, but regrets just set you backwards.
Well, is there anything else you'd like to add as we close?
Trust the Lord. Well, what I say sometimes on the phone to people who are calling about different things, I know and I love and I trust Jesus, and I hope you do too. That's basically it to me.
Not much better way to close than that. How about you, Chuck? Do you have anything as we close?
I thank you so much for bringing your lifetime of wisdom to me, and I know you give it to your grandson all the time, but now you just brought it to so many more, and I couldn't think of a better ministry than your testimony and your story today. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement.
Thank you for being our guest, Grandpa. I appreciate you, and I thank all of you for making us a part of the pursuit of your purpose. I'm Robbie. This is Chuck. This is my grandpa, Weldon Kaspar, and thank you for joining us.